Hello, everybody. Today, I want us to dive into a very serious topic: why cancer rates are climbing, especially among millennials and now Gen Z, and what's really behind it. We'll break down the risk factors, how they affect the body, and what we can do. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, and share because knowledge is power when it comes to health. This is Bwiri MedTalks, your trusted source for health, help, and hope. To set the scene, research from the American Cancer Society (ACS) found that among adults born more recently, there's an uptick in 17 of 34 cancer types compared to earlier generations. Also, young adults under age 50 are not immune, and in fact, we are seeing what experts call early onset cancers rising. So, this is the backdrop. You and your friends are a part of a generation facing unusual risks. Why this generation? Why Gen Z? Why millennials? Here is our roadmap. Instead of just saying you are at risk, I want to walk you through why this generation is particularly vulnerable. We look at 8 big risk areas, one by one, and show how each works in the body to increase chances of cancer. Then, we wrap up with how you can stay one step ahead. So, these major risk areas that I will discuss include screen time and artificial light, tobacco and vaping, processed foods and chemicals, ultraviolet exposure (UV), sedentary lifestyle and obesity, environmental toxins, sleep disruption and hormone imbalance, and finally, I will look at the genetic predisposition and interaction and how each leads to abnormal cell growth, called cancer. First up, screen time and artificial light. Many of us scroll on our phones, watch streams, or work late into the night, but of course, under artificial lights. Now, there is a problem, and here is the problem. Our bodies produce a hormone called melatonin at night, and this hormone not only helps us to sleep, but also it seems to regulate cell growth and repair. When melatonin hormone is suppressed, the protective mechanisms that keep cells from going wrong get weaker. Over time, that can increase risk of abnormal cell growth called cancer. And for a generation that is glued to screens, this is a real factor. Next, tobacco products, traditional smoking, and increasingly vaping and other novel forms. Tobacco smoke contains powerful carcinogens that directly damage DNA in lung cells and elsewhere, triggering mutations and uncontrolled cell division. Even though many older adults may have reduced smoking, younger people are engaging with the new products and patterns, which means then that damage starts earlier and accumulates longer. The bottom line is this: the earlier you begin exposure, the greater lifetime risk for cancer. Then we have diet and chemical exposures. You and I must agree that many millennials and Gen Z consume processed foods, sugary drinks, fast food, which tend to give excess calories, poor nutrient density, and promote obesity and inflammation. On top of that, contaminated foods, for example, there have been reports of formalin in milk, laced meat, chemical residues in packaged foods, which carry toxins. And by the way, the body has to respond and it has to try to fix it by detoxification. Chronic inflammation, oxidative stress, hormone disruption, all of these contribute to cell damage and increase likelihood of cancerous transformation. Another culprit, UV exposure, ultraviolet exposure. Now, whether from the sun or from tanning beds, UV light penetrates the skin and damages the DNA of skin cells. When that damage accumulates and repair mechanisms fail, that's when skin cancer or melanoma can develop. Younger generations often engage in tanning or use sunbeds or spend prolonged time outdoors without protection. So this risk is elevated for our cohort. Let's talk about activity. When we are sedentary, lots of sitting, minimal regular exercise, our bodies don't benefit from immune system boost. Circulation is reduced and adipose, which is a fat tissue, accumulates. Fat tissue is not just inert, it produces hormones and inflammatory signals that can promote cancer. A research indicates that obesity, processed foods, and inactivity are a part of the rising cancer risks among young adults. So, if you are spending most of your day behind a screen or desk, then know that this is a red flag. Now, consider the environment around you. You are not born in the same world your parents were. More plastics, chemicals, additives everywhere. More devices, more synthetic materials. Many of these chemicals are known or suspected as endocrine disruptors. They interfere with the hormone action or they accumulate as toxins that can damage DNA, weaken immune function, or disturb cell repair. While I might not have definitive data for every chemical, this generational shift in exposure is part of the puzzle. Sleep matters a lot, and I've been saying this consistently. When you sleep poorly or shift your sleep wake rhythm, think late nights, social media, all night study sessions, night shifts, you challenge hormonal balance. For example, a hormone called melatonin, which we mentioned earlier, is produced at night. Cortisol and other stress hormones may stay elevated. The immune system weakens, repair processes slow down, and the cells may divide incorrectly. Over time, this sets up a fertile ground for abnormal growth and cancer. Finally, genetics. Yes, there are inherited gene mutations, for example, BRCA genes, familial syndromes that raise baseline risk. But genetics alone can't fully explain this surge in younger generations. What's increasingly likely the interaction between genes and environment or lifestyle. In other words, you may have a genetic predisposition, but how much it translates into cancer depends on your exposures, behavior, and environment. That's why these generations' distinct exposures and habits matter so much. Let's zoom in on how all these risk factors actually translate into cancer. It's not just bad habits, there is a chain of biology. Risk factors cause DNA damage or mutation. If DNA repair or immune surveillance fails, then mutated cells may survive. Chronic inflammation and oxidative stress create a hostile environment perpetuating damage. Hormonal imbalances push cells to divide when they shouldn't. And epigenetic changes alter how genes behave without changing the DNA sequence. Put together, these processes enable normal cells to become malignant. To make this more real, let's take colorectal cancer as an example. Studies show that in adults younger than 55, incidence is climbing by about 1 to 2% each year. Why? Because many of the risk factors we've been talking about, obesity, processed diet, inactivity, inflammation, converge there. Also, younger people may not qualify yet for routine colonoscope screening, so diagnosis may come later with worse outcomes. That's why awareness and early action are key. One risk alone is bad. Many of us have several stacked together. Screen time, processed food, inactivity, chemical exposures, they don't act in isolation. And because these exposures often begin early in life, childhood or adolescence, younger generations may carry a heavier cumulative burden as they age. That means the generation of millennials and Gen Z could face higher lifetime cancer risks unless we act. Here is the good news. Many of these risk factors are modifiable. You might not control everything because you can't always choose your genes or environment completely, but you can make strong choices. Reduce late night screen time, protect your sleep, quit smoking, eat better, move more, protect your skin, minimize chemical exposures, know your family history, and talk to your doctor. By doing this, you reduce the chances that those exposures convert into something worse. So let's see the role of health systems and the police in regard to cancer in relation to younger generations, the Gen Z and the millennials. Health systems should consider early screening for younger people at risk. Researchers must dig into generation-specific exposures. Public health campaigns must speak to millennials and Gen Z in the language of understanding. Governments and regulators must tighten controls on harmful chemicals and ensure food safety, limit marketing of junk to youth. It's a team effort. Challenges ahead? Yes, there are challenges. Many exposures don't feel tangible. You can't see the chemical. You don't feel the damage until much later. Routine screening often starts later in life, so younger people may fall through the cracks. Socioeconomic factors matter too. People with fewer resources may face more risk and less access to prevention. So, if we don't act, the generation wide burden of cancer could escalate considerably by 2050. That's why urgency matters now. In conclusion, yes, millennials and Gen Z face heightened risks of cancer due to multiple lifestyle, environmental, and generational factors. But you also have the power by making informed choices, demanding better from governments, sharing knowledge, influencing culture. Be a generation that not only lives longer, but lives healthier. If you found this useful, hit subscribe on Bwiri MedTalks. Like this video, comment below with your thoughts or questions, share it with your friends. Let's make this a movement for health. Here are a few books if you want to dig deeper. I encourage you, especially if you're in the health sciences like I am, to look at these and share them with others. Remember, knowledge grows when we pass it on, right? So the first book that I highly recommend is The Biology of Cancer by Robert A. Weinberg, second edition. I also recommend you read Cancer, The Evolutionary Legacy by Med Greaves. And finally, I also recommend you read Oncogenomics, Cancer Susceptibility and Risk by Paul D. Fisher. Bye.